What is up, Prac-E's? Welcome to Ask Prac-E Anything, episode 3. My name is Liam D. Auliciems, and in this episode we're talking about everything to do with classroom behaviour management. Let's get on to question number 1.
What is the worst case of class behaviour that you've witnessed?
So the worst behaviour I've seen in a class was probably on my first few pracs, because they're at the same school, and this school actually, when I was doing research on it from the beginning, was ranked number 1 for behaviour issues. It was number 1 for expulsions, suspensions, everything like that. So I was quite nervous beforehand, but on looking back in hindsight, I know it was probably a good thing, because it chucked me into the deep end. It was a bit of a baptism of fire, but because of that now I'm comfortable with anything. There's nothing a kid could do in a class that would surprise me much. I could go on endless stories about some of the kids that were there, but one story that comes to mind was this kid. My teacher was doing their ordinary classes, but then they also had learning difficulties class. And in this school there was so many kids of so many different groups and backgrounds that learning difficulties class was basically anyone that was slow or anyone, and there was just no real kind of streamlined need. It was this whole bunch of kids, whether it be behaviour or autism or dyslexia or whatever it is, they're all kind of just chucked into the one class instead of their mainstream class. So she said, look, we don't really have a bona fide curriculum for these kids. They're just kind of the sick puppies of each class, and they all get chucked in together, so you don't have to come. But I had a spare, I wasn't doing anything, so I thought I might as well show up and see what it was like. So I went to that class and just sat up the back, and there was one kid there that was best mates actually with the kid that I told the story in on this week's Prac Teacher 101, so check that video out. He was best mates, this was his mate, and he was in my class, and he had just, ironically enough, also had just come back from a suspension. And I was walking into the class just beforehand to get, my desk at the back set up, and he was standing out the front of the class before everyone came in with his nose under his jumper like that, and he had an aerosol from the bottom and was making like a hot room of aerosol, and was just like sniffing it and getting high off the fumes, and that was before the class had even begun. So he's going psh, 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 as I'm walking in, and I go, okay, awesome, this kid's going to be off the walls, because he already had some sort of development problem, which meant he couldn't sit still ever. So now he was high on top of that as well. So he was just off the walls, literally. He got up and was running around the side of around the class and kind of smacking kids in the head as he ran past. Something that I wish I could do as a teacher, but he just took it upon himself to actually do it. So he was running around smacking kids, and then that was bad enough, but then he jumped up on top of the chairs, on top of the tables, and was doing the same thing. And the chairs were kind of like in 3 pods, and he was jumping in between each of the 3 of them, doing like a really manic laugh, like a and like running around and going absolutely nuts. And then my teacher, because there's a rule that you can't really touch a kid or like grab a kid unless he's really doing damage to other people or to himself. You could say the smacks in the head was damage, but my teacher didn't really want to go into that grey area until he jumped off the table, and he jumped so high that his head hit the fan as he jumped. So he went boom and went down and was like on his knees, and then my teacher just grabbed hold of him, and it was really strange because as soon as she touched him, he just stopped. It was quite weird. It was like a cow or a horse being hypnotized. It's like as soon as she grabbed him, he just went and stopped, and then from then on, he wasn't an issue. So that was probably the most hectic behavioural problem that I've seen in a classroom. But it's taught me a few things, especially how to deal with a kid that's going literally off the wall.
How do I not harbour grudges against problem students?
I know in my personal experience, when you have a kid in your class and they're just a problem kid all the time, non-stop, every lesson, and you know for a fact that every time you do an activity, you're going to have to factor their control scheme into the lesson plan because they're not going to do what you want them to do. And it's very easy to start to harbour a personal grudge against that kid, and it's a lot easy to kind of just really focus on them all the time, and then eventually that turns into a really negative relationship because they're testing you out, they're trying you out, and then as soon as anything goes wrong in your class, you're always subconsciously looking to them first, which makes them feel victimized, and they're not learning, they're disrupting everyone else. You're not enjoying them in your class, they're not enjoying you, and it gets to that stage where it's really negative and it's just an ugly atmosphere. So I know it's so easy to just harbour a grudge against that kid, but there are some things to keep in mind with that, and harbouring a grudge against a problem kid isn't going to solve the behavioural issues for them or for you or for the class generally. So some things to keep in mind that I've found work is I asked this very question at my PD the other day, and he said to hate the sin, not the sinner. Sometimes kids, especially that 8, 9, 10 period in the grading system, they're naturally going into a stage where they're questioning authority for the sake of it because they've been in school from the very get-go, from grade 1. So they're just getting used to the system. They're right in the middle. Grade 12 and graduation seems so much far away, but grade 1 seems ages ago, so they're kind of in limbo land, and they're taking a step back in their mental development and going, actually, why am I doing this? Who says I have to do this? And so they're naturally questioning authority. So a lot of the time they're not doing it personally against you. I'd say 99% of the time it's not against you personally, it's for who you represent. You represent the man to them, and in that stage of their development they're naturally wanting to go against that. So it's not personal against you, and it's not personal against them either. And sometimes it's, like I said in Prac Teacher 101, a lot of the time school is last on the priority list for them because they've got a broken home or their situation outside of school isn't the best either. So it's incorrect to naturally go against a kid just for the sake of it. You may have one kid in the blue moon that's just narcissistic psychopath like that will just test you for the sake of it, but a lot of the time it's because of something, and whether it be their situation or their development. So one key thing for dealing with behaviour is not to hold a grudge against that kid personally, because that will never result in a positive outcome. That's been Ask Prac-E Anything episode 3. My name is Liam D. Auliciems on Prac-E, an online blog made by teachers for teachers. Question for you, the viewer. When you were at school, what was the number one thing you got in trouble for? The biggest thing that sent you down to the deputy head's office. So share that down in the comments. Make sure you ask questions, get into contact on our email, and I'll see you next week.